The mansion is dead quiet, until a maid explodes into the master bedroom, screaming, "Don't drink it!" Damien Cross freezes with a teacup inches from his lips, while his elegant wife Celeste holds the tray like a saint delivering comfort. In one breath, the house flips from luxury to lethal. What happens when the person sleeping beside you becomes your executioner? When the wedding vows turn into a death sentence signed in powder and poured with a smile? This is the story of how one woman's greed collided with another woman's courage, and how a split-second scream saved a life while exposing a conspiracy that had been brewing in plain sight. Stay with me until the very end, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Damien Cross had built an empire on instinct. At 47, he owned a portfolio that stretched across real estate, tech startups, and venture capital. Each acquisition a testament to his ability to read people, markets, and risk. His mansion in the Pacific Heights district of San Francisco was a monument to that success. 8 bedrooms, a wine cellar that could host a small museum, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Golden Gate Bridge like a painting. But empires, Damien had learned, could be built on sand. And lately, the ground beneath his feet had started to shift. His marriage to Celeste had been a spectacle from the beginning. She was 29 when they met at a charity gala in Manhattan, a former model with cheekbones that could cut glass and a smile that had been photographed on magazine covers across Europe. Damien had been 42, newly divorced from his first wife, and Celeste had approached him with a champagne flute and a line so smooth it should have been rehearsed. "You look like a man who's tired of being underestimated." She wasn't wrong. His first marriage had been to his college sweetheart, a woman who'd wanted a simpler life than Damien could ever provide. When the divorce papers were signed, Damien had thrown himself into work, into deals, into anything that didn't require him to feel the hollow ache of failure. Celeste had offered something different: beauty, sophistication, and the kind of social currency that opened doors even Damien's money couldn't unlock. They married 6 months later in a ceremony that made the society pages. Celeste wore Vera Wang. The guest list read like a who's who of Silicon Valley and old money. And for the first year, it had been adequate. Not love exactly, but a partnership. Celeste knew how to work a room, how to host dinners that left investors leaning forward, hungry for the next opportunity. She understood that Damien's time was his most valuable asset, and she rarely demanded more than her fair share. But somewhere around the 18-month mark, things had started to curdle. It began with small things. Celeste's credit card bills climbing higher each month, $50,000, $70,000, once a jaw-dropping $120,000 for a weekend shopping trip to Paris. Damien had raised an eyebrow, mentioned it over breakfast, and Celeste had laughed it off. "Darling, you don't build an image on clearance racks." He'd let it go. After all, what was $100,000 when his quarterly earnings were measured in millions? Then came the demands. A vacation home in Aspen, a yacht, not a boat, a yacht moored in the marina. Membership in exclusive clubs where Celeste could network with wives whose husbands controlled fortunes even larger than Damien's. Each request came wrapped in logic, delivered with a smile, and punctuated with subtle reminders of what Damien owed her for the life she'd given up to marry him. "I could have had anyone," she'd said once, her voice soft but edged with something sharper. "But I chose you." Damien had nodded, signed the checks, and tried not to notice the growing distance between them. They shared a bed but rarely touched. Conversations revolved around logistics: who would attend which gala, which investors needed courting, whether the new interior designer was worth the outrageous retainer. The warmth that had existed in those early months, fragile as it was, had evaporated. By their 3rd anniversary, Damien realized he'd married a stranger. But he was busy. Too busy to unravel a failing marriage. Too busy to confront the fact that Celeste looked at him less like a husband and more like a financing option. He threw himself into a new acquisition, a biotech firm on the verge of a breakthrough in personalized medicine, and told himself that marriages ebbed and flowed. This was just a rough patch. That's when Nia Walker entered the picture. Damien hadn't been involved in the hiring process. Celeste handled the household staff, a revolving door of cleaners, cooks, and personal assistants who rarely lasted more than a few months. Celeste had exacting standards, and she wasn't shy about enforcing them. The previous housekeeper had been let go after folding a towel incorrectly. The one before that had committed the sin of humming while she worked. So when Damien came home one Tuesday evening and found a new face in the kitchen, he barely registered it. Nia was 26, small frame with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, and eyes that seemed to take in everything without ever demanding attention. She wore the standard uniform, black slacks, white blouse, sensible shoes, and she moved through the house like a shadow, efficient and invisible. "Good evening, Mr. Cross," she'd said, her voice soft but steady. Damien had nodded, distracted by an email on his phone, and moved past her toward his office. Over the next few weeks, Damien noticed her in the way one notices a well-oiled machine, only when it stops working. But Nia never stopped. The house was always immaculate. Coffee appeared on his desk at exactly 6:30 each morning, prepared the way he liked it without his ever having to ask. Meals were served on time, dishes cleared without a sound. She seemed to anticipate needs before they were spoken. "Where did you find this one?" Damien asked Celeste one evening over dinner. Celeste didn't look up from her phone. "Agency." Her references were acceptable. "She's good." "She's adequate," Celeste corrected. "Don't get attached. They never last." But Nia did last. Week after week, she showed up on time, worked without complaint, and maintained a professionalism that bordered on invisible. Damien found himself curious about her in the way one becomes curious about anomalies. Most of the staff Celeste hired came from privileged backgrounds. Out-of-work actresses, former sorority girls funding gap years in Europe. They treated the job as temporary, a stepping stone to something better. Nia was different. She worked with the focus of someone who couldn't afford to fail. It was a small moment that shifted Damien's perception. He'd been working late in his study, the rest of the house dark and silent, when he'd heard a soft knock. "Come in." Nia stepped inside, carrying a tray with tea and a small plate of cookies. "I noticed your light was still on, Mr. Cross. I thought you might need something." Damien glanced at the clock. It was past 11. "You're still here?" "I wanted to finish the upstairs linens before tomorrow." She set the tray on his desk, movements precise. "You don't have to stay this late." "I don't mind." She met his eyes briefly, then looked away. "My mother always said idle hands invite trouble." There was something in the way she said it. Not servile, not rehearsed, but matter of fact. Damien found himself asking, "Where are you from, Nia?" "Small town in Idaho. You wouldn't have heard of it." "Try me." "Priest River, population about 2,000. She was right. He'd never heard of it. "What brought you to San Francisco?" A pause. "Opportunity." She adjusted the tray slightly, aligning the cup handle with the edge of the saucer. "My mother's sick. Medical bills don't pay themselves." Damien felt something twist in his chest, an uncomfortable recognition of realities he'd insulated himself from. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We manage." She straightened, her expression smoothing back into professional neutrality. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Cross?" "No, thank you, Nia." She nodded and slipped out as quietly as she'd arrived. After that, Damien found himself noticing her more. Not in any inappropriate way, but with a kind of distant respect. Nia worked harder than anyone else on staff, and she did it without fanfare or complaint. She was there before dawn, often still cleaning long after Celeste had gone to bed. She never asked for time off, never called in sick, never let her focus waver. And she watched. Damien didn't realize how much until later, but Nia had a way of seeing things others missed. She noticed when Celeste's mood shifted, when tension crackled in the air before an argument, when certain visitors made Damien's jaw tighten. One of those visitors was Landon Vale. Landon was a fixture in Celeste's social circle, a venture capitalist with a trust fund, a convertible Porsche, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been introduced to Damien as a family friend, though Damien had never bothered to ask which family. Landon showed up at dinners, at parties, always with a bottle of expensive wine and a joke that fell flat. Damien tolerated him because Celeste seemed to enjoy his company, and keeping Celeste happy was easier than dealing with her moods. But there was something about Landon that set Damien's instincts on edge, a slickness, a calculation in the way he assessed people and situations. "Damien, you work too hard. Landon had said once, lounging on the patio with a glass of scotch. You need to learn to delegate. Enjoy life a little. I enjoy building things, Damien had replied, his tone flat. And when you're dead, who inherits all this? Landon had gestured broadly at the house, the view, the empire. You need heirs, man. Legacy. Celeste had laughed, a brittle sound. Damien's married to his work, Landon. I'm just the mistress. The comment had landed like a stone in still water. Damien had excused himself, leaving Celeste and Landon to their drinks and their laughter. Nia had been in the kitchen that night, cleaning up after dinner. Damien had poured himself a whiskey and sat at the counter, silent. Rough evening, Mr. Cross? Nia had asked, her voice carefully neutral. You could say that. She'd continued wiping down the counters, giving him space. After a moment, she'd said quietly, For what it's worth, I think you build beautiful things. Damien had looked up, surprised. You do? Yes, sir. I read about the biotech acquisition, personalized medicine. That could save lives. She'd rinsed the cloth, wrung it out. That's a legacy. It was such a small thing, but it hit Damien harder than he expected. When was the last time someone had acknowledged his work as anything other than a means to wealth? Thank you, Nia. She'd nodded and quietly left him alone. As the weeks turned into months, Damien began to notice patterns. Landon's visits became more frequent, always when Damien was traveling, always extending late into the evening. Celeste's demeanor shifted on those days. She was lighter, more animated, almost girlish in a way Damien hadn't seen in years. And then there were the closed doors. Damien had come home early one Thursday from a meeting that had been canceled at the last minute. He'd walked into the house expecting it to be empty. Celeste had mentioned something about a spa day, but he'd heard voices from the sitting room. Low, intimate, punctuated by laughter. He'd paused in the hallway, listening. Can't keep doing this, Celeste was saying, her voice hushed but urgent. Why not? Landon's voice, smooth and amused. He's clueless. He's not stupid, Landon. He'll notice. Then we move faster. A long pause. Then Celeste, quieter. How much longer? Patience, darling. These things take time. Damien had felt his pulse spike. He'd pushed the door open without knocking. Celeste and Landon had sprung apart like teenagers caught in a closet. Celeste recovered first, her smile snapping into place. Damien, you're home early. Meeting got canceled. Damien's gaze moved between them. What are you two plotting? Plotting? Celeste laughed, the sound high and false. We were just discussing the fundraiser next month. Landon's offered to sponsor a table. Landon raised his glass in a mock toast. Anything for a good cause. Damien had nodded slowly, not believing a word of it, but too tired to press. I'll be in my office. He'd walked away, but the unease had settled in his gut like a stone. Nia had been in the hallway carrying fresh linens. She'd seen him, seen the tension in his shoulders, and stepped aside to let him pass. Mr. Cross? She'd said softly. He'd stopped, turned. Yes? She'd hesitated, then shook her head. Nothing, sir. I hope your day improves. But her eyes had said something different, something careful and concerned. That night, Damien couldn't sleep. He lay beside Celeste, listening to her breathe, and wondered when their marriage had become a performance. He thought about Landon, about the whispered conversation, about the way Celeste's smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. And he thought about Nia, the quiet maid who worked harder than anyone and seemed to see more than she let on. Something was wrong. Damien could feel it the way he felt a bad investment before the numbers proved him right. But he didn't know what, and he didn't know how to ask. So he did what he always did. He buried himself in work. The biotech acquisition closed. A new venture capital fund launched. Board meetings, investor calls, 18-hour days that left him too exhausted to think about anything but sleep. Celeste seemed pleased by his absence. She stopped asking when he'd be home, stopped planning dinners or events that required his presence. She spent more time with Landon, more time out of the house, more time in a world Damien no longer had access to. And Nia kept working, kept watching, kept moving through the house like a ghost who saw everything and said nothing. Until the day she couldn't stay silent anymore. It started with a Friday. Damien had been in New York all week, closing a deal that had taken months to structure. He'd flown back late Thursday night, landed at SFO just after midnight, and crawled into bed without waking Celeste. Friday morning, he woke to an empty house. No Celeste, no Landon, just Nia, moving through her routine with the same quiet efficiency. Damien made himself coffee and sat in the breakfast nook, watching the fog roll across the bay. He felt bone-tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. "Good morning, Mr. Cross." He turned. Nia stood in the doorway, holding a basket of fresh linens. "Morning, Nia. Where's Celeste?" "She left early, sir. Said she had errands." Damien nodded, unsurprised. "Of course." Nia hesitated, then set the basket down. "Mr. Cross, may I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Are you feeling all right?" He looked at her, startled. "Why do you ask?" "You seem tired, more than usual." She folded her hands, careful. "I don't mean to overstep." "You're not." Damien rubbed his face. "I am tired, Nia. Very tired. Maybe you should rest today. Take care of yourself." There was something in her voice, an urgency she was trying to mask. Damien studied her face, saw the tension in her jaw. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Nia's eyes widened slightly, then she shook her head. "No, sir. I worry. That's all." Before Damien could respond, his phone buzzed. An email from his attorney. He glanced at it, sighed, and stood. "Duty calls." Nia stepped aside to let him pass, but as he walked away, he could feel her gaze on his back, heavy, troubled, filled with something she couldn't quite bring herself to say. Damien spent the day in his office, drowning in paperwork and conference calls. By late afternoon, his head was pounding and his eyes burned from staring at screens. He needed a break. He needed rest. He needed to stop ignoring the warning signs flashing in his peripheral vision. When he finally emerged from his office, the house was quiet again. The sun had set, painting the windows in shades of amber and rose. Damien walked through the empty rooms, listening to the silence, and felt a strange, creeping dread. Where was everyone? He found Nia in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "Nia, have you seen Celeste?" "She came back about an hour ago, sir. She's upstairs." "Is Landon here?" Nia's hand stilled. "He was, sir. He left just before you came out." Damien felt that unease spike again. "How long was he here?" "Most of the afternoon." Nia kept her eyes on the cutting board. "They were in the sitting room. The door was closed." Damien's jaw tightened. "I see." He turned to go, but Nia's voice stopped him. "Mr. Cross." He looked back. She was gripping the edge of the counter, knuckles white. "Please be careful." "Careful of what?" Nia opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. "Nothing. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything." But she had. And Damien couldn't unhear it. He climbed the stairs slowly, his mind racing. Be careful. Careful of what? Of Celeste? Of Landon? Of something he wasn't seeing? He reached the bedroom door, pushed it open. Celeste was there, standing by the window in a silk robe, backlit by the fading light. She turned when she heard him, and her face transformed, softened, warmed, became the woman he'd married. "Damien," she said, her voice gentle. "You look exhausted." He was. He felt it in his bones. "Come sit." She gestured to the bed. "Let me take care of you." There was something surreal about the moment. Celeste, suddenly solicitous, suddenly tender. Damien wanted to trust it, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to something real. He sat on the edge of the bed, and Celeste disappeared into the bathroom. He heard water running, cabinet doors opening and closing. When she returned, she was carrying a tray. On it sat a delicate porcelain cup filled with tea, his favorite, the expensive oolong he only drank when he was stressed. "I made this for you," Celeste said, setting the tray on the nightstand. "You need to relax." Damien looked at the tea, then at his wife. She was smiling, but there was something in her eyes, something glittering and cold beneath the warmth. "Thank you," he said slowly. "Drink it while it's hot." She handed him the cup, her fingers brushing his. Damien brought the cup to his lips, the steam curling against his face. He was so tired, so ready to let go, to trust, to believe that things could be different. The cup was an inch from his mouth when the door slammed open. Nia stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes wild. "Don't drink it!" she screamed. Damien froze. Celeste's smile vanished, replaced by something sharp and vicious. "What the hell are you doing?" But Nia didn't move. She stared at Damien, at the cup in his hand, and said the words that would shatter everything. "She put something in it. I saw her." The teacup trembled in Damien's hand, hot liquid sloshing against porcelain. For 3 heartbeats, the room was frozen, a tableau of accusation and disbelief. Then Celeste moved, fast and vicious as a snake striking. "Get out!" She lunged toward Nia, her silk robe billowing. "Get out of this house right now!" But Nia stood her ground, planted in the doorway like a tree that had weathered storms far worse than Celeste's rage. Her voice came out steady, clear, cutting through the charged air. "I saw you, in the kitchen, 20 minutes ago." Damien's gaze swung between them, his wife, beautiful and trembling with fury, and his maid, small and unremarkable except for the iron certainty in her eyes. The cup was still in his hand. He could smell the oolong, that familiar bergamot sweetness he'd loved for years. "Damien, she's insane." Celeste's voice turned honeyed, pleading. "She's been acting strange for weeks. I was going to let her go, but I felt sorry for her." "You were in the kitchen," Nia interrupted, her words measured like hammer blows. "You sent me upstairs to change the sheets in the guest room. You said you wanted privacy to prepare something special for Mr. Cross, but I forgot my phone on the counter, so I came back down." She took a breath, never breaking eye contact with Damien. "The door was cracked open. I saw you take a small glass bottle from your purse. I saw you pour white powder into that teacup. I saw you stir it until it dissolved." Celeste laughed, high and brittle. "This is ridiculous. Damien, tell her, where's your purse?" Damien's voice came out hoarse, foreign to his own ears. "What?" "Your purse, Celeste, where is it?" Something flickered across his wife's face, fear, quick and raw, before the mask slammed back down. "This is absurd. I'm not going to be interrogated in my own home by the help. Where is it?" Celeste's hands clenched into fists in the closet. "But Damien, you can't seriously believe—" He set the teacup down on the nightstand with exaggerated care, as if it were a live grenade. His legs felt unsteady when he stood, adrenaline flooding his system in cold waves. He walked to the walk-in closet, acutely aware of both women watching him, and found Celeste's Hermes bag on the center island where she always left it. "Don't you dare!" Celeste's voice cracked. "That's my private property." Damien upended the bag. Lipstick, compact, keys, wallet, phone, all of it clattered onto the marble surface. And there, rolling to a stop against a Chanel compact, was a small glass bottle with a dropper cap. Clear liquid inside, innocent as water. The silence that followed was absolute. Damien picked up the bottle, held it to the light. No label, no markings. Just clear liquid that could be anything. Essential oil, homeopathic remedy, vitamin drops, or poison. "Damien, I can explain." Celeste's voice had lost its edge, turned desperate. It's a supplement for anxiety. My therapist recommended it." "You don't have a therapist," Damien said quietly. "I just started seeing one. I haven't told you because you're never here." "What's in the bottle, Celeste?" "I told you, anxiety drops. Valerian root extract." Nia spoke from the doorway, her voice cutting clean. "Then you won't mind if Mr. Cross has it tested." Celeste's face went white. Actually, white. The color draining so fast Damien thought she might faint. Then red flooded back in, angry blotches climbing her throat. "How dare you? How dare you stand there and accuse me?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Nia said calmly. "I'm just saying if it's harmless, a lab test will prove that. Clear your name completely." The logic was airtight. Damien watched his wife, watched the calculations racing behind her eyes, watched her realize she was cornered. "Fine." Celeste's voice turned to ice. "Test it. And when it comes back clean, I want her fired. I want her arrested for slander. I want—" "Call Dr. Morrison," Damien said, still staring at the bottle. "Tell him I need an emergency analysis. Tell him it's life or death." For a moment, he thought Celeste might refuse. Her jaw worked, grinding back words, but then she pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed. The next hour unfolded in surreal slow motion. Dr. Andrew Morrison, Damien's personal physician for 15 years, arrived within 30 minutes, still wearing his golf clothes and carrying a medical kit. He was a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and he took one look at the scene. Damien pale and shaken, Celeste vibrating with barely contained rage, Nia standing silent guard by the door and asked no questions beyond the essential. "You want me to test this liquid and the tea?" Morrison held up the bottle and the still steaming cup. "Yes, both. I need to know what's in them." Morrison nodded slowly. "I can run a preliminary test here for common toxins. Cyanide, arsenic, strychnine, those show up fast. Anything more exotic will need a full lab workup." "Do it." Morrison pulled out a field testing kit, the kind emergency responders used for suspected poisonings. He worked in silence, adding drops of the tea to various reagent strips, watching for color changes. Then he did the same with the liquid from the bottle. Celeste sat on the bed, perfectly still, her face a mask. But Damien could see the tremor in her hands, the way her breathing had gone shallow. 3 minutes later, Morrison looked up. His face had gone grave. "Damien, this tea contains a significant amount of potassium cyanide. The concentration is high enough to be rapidly fatal. If you drunk even half that cup, you'd be dead within minutes." The words landed like physical blows. Damien's knees buckled. He sat down hard on the ottoman, the room spinning. "And the bottle?" His voice came out as a whisper. "Appears to be a concentrated cyanide solution, extremely toxic. Even skin contact could be dangerous." Morrison's gaze shifted to Celeste, cold and clinical. "Where did you obtain this?" Celeste said nothing. She stared at the floor, her chest rising and falling too fast. "Mrs. Cross, I need to know the source. If there are other containers, if anyone else might have been exposed." "She won't tell you," Nia said softly from the doorway, "because she didn't get it by accident." Morrison turned to look at her, then back at Damien. Understanding dawned slow and terrible across his face. "Damien, I need to call the police. This is attempted murder." "No." Celeste's head snapped up. "No, you don't understand. I wasn't going to. It was just—" Her words tangled, desperation bleeding through. "It was for protection, in case I ever needed to defend myself." "Defend yourself with cyanide?" Morrison's voice was flat, disbelieving. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "I want a lawyer." Celeste stood abruptly. "I'm not saying another word without legal representation." "That's probably wise." Damien's voice sounded dead even to his own ears. He looked at his wife, the woman he'd married, the woman he'd shared his life with, and saw a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. He saw a killer. "Because I'm calling the police and I'm pressing charges." Celeste's composure cracked. "Damien, please. We can talk about this, just the two of us. Send them away and we can—" "Talk?" The word came out sharp, vicious. "You just tried to murder me, Celeste. What exactly is there to talk about?" I wasn't—" Tears spilled down her cheeks, perfect and theatrical. "I love you. I would never hurt you. You put poison in my tea." "She's lying." Celeste pointed a shaking finger at Nia. "That girl is lying. She probably put it there herself to frame me, to get her hands on your money." "Enough." Damien pulled out his phone. His hands were remarkably steady considering his entire world had just detonated. "Dr. Morrison, please secure those samples. I want a full toxicology report. Chain of custody, everything documented." "Already on it." Damien dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency?" "My name is Damien Cross. I need police at my residence immediately. There's been an attempted murder." Celeste made a sound like a wounded animal and bolted for the door. Nia stepped into her path, blocking the exit with her small frame. "Move," Celeste hissed. "No, ma'am." "I said move." "Mrs. Cross, I'd advise you to sit down and wait for the police." Nia's voice was gentle but immovable. "Running will only make this worse." For a moment, Damien thought Celeste might physically attack her. Celeste's hands curled into claws, her face contorting with rage and panic. But then Morrison stepped forward, positioning himself between the women. "Mrs. Cross, please, don't make this harder than it already is." The fight drained out of her all at once. Celeste crumpled onto the bed, sobbing into her hands, and Damien felt absolutely nothing. No sympathy, no regret, just a vast, echoing emptiness where his marriage used to be. The police arrived 12 minutes later. 2 uniformed officers followed by a detective, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Detective Sarah Chen. She listened to Damien's account, examined the evidence, spoke briefly with Morrison, and then turned her attention to Celeste. "Mrs. Cross, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent." "This is a mistake." Celeste's voice was thick with tears. "My husband is confused. He's been under stress. He's not thinking clearly." "Ma'am, there's cyanide in your purse and in your husband's tea. That's not confusion. That's evidence." Chen gestured to one of the officers. "Cuff her." Watching Celeste being handcuffed was one of the most surreal experiences of Damien's life. This woman who'd graced magazine covers, who'd hosted senators and tech moguls in this very house, was now being read her Miranda rights in their bedroom. She looked small suddenly, diminished, her beauty useless against the steel around her wrists. As they led her toward the stairs, Celeste looked back at Damien one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." He said nothing. There was nothing to say. After they took her away, Detective Chen turned to Nia. "Miss, I'm going to need a full statement from you. Everything you saw, exact times if you remember them." Nia nodded. "Of course. And Mr. Cross, I'll need to speak with you as well. But first," Chen's expression softened slightly. "Are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine." Damien realized it was a lie as soon as he said it. He wasn't fine. He was standing in the wreckage of his life, trying to process that his wife had just tried to kill him. Morrison touched his shoulder. "Damien, you should let me run some tests. Make sure you didn't ingest any. I didn't drink it." Damien looked at Nia, still standing quietly by the door. "She stopped me in time." Chen followed his gaze. "Miss Walker, is it? You saved this man's life today." Nia's cheeks colored slightly. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Damien said, his voice rough. "Most people would have looked the other way. Most people wouldn't have risked their job, their safety, to tell the truth." He met her eyes. "Thank you, Nia. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up." She ducked her head, uncomfortable with the attention. "You're welcome, Mr. Cross." The next several hours were a blur of statements, evidence collection, and forensic photography. The police tagged and bagged the teacup, the bottle, Celeste's purse, even the kitchen where Nia had witnessed the poisoning. They took photographs of everything, measured angles, reconstructed timelines. Through it all, Damien sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he couldn't bring himself to drink and tried to make sense of the senseless. Why? That was the question that kept circling his brain like a vulture. Why would Celeste want him dead? Money, obviously. She'd inherit everything if he died while they were still married. But Celeste had access to virtually unlimited funds already. She could buy anything, go anywhere, do anything. Why risk murder? Unless it wasn't just about money. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Landon's voice in the sitting room. "Then we move faster." And Celeste's response, "How much longer?" Damien's blood ran cold. Landon, that slick, smiling bastard, had been in the house constantly, always when Damien was away, always behind closed doors with Celeste. He pulled out his phone and called Detective Chen. She answered immediately. "Mr. Cross, is everything all right?" "There's someone else involved, a man named Landon Vale. He's been spending a lot of time with Celeste, and I overheard them talking about moving faster on something, asking how much longer they had to wait." Damien's grip tightened on the phone. "I think he might be her accomplice." Chen was quiet for a moment. "Do you have his contact information?" "I can get it. Celeste has his number saved in her phone." "We have her phone in evidence. I'll look into Mr. Vale. In the meantime, Mr. Cross, I'd advise you to be careful. If there is an accomplice, they may try to—" "Finish what Celeste started," Damien finished grimly. "Yeah, I figured." After he hung up, Damien sat in the growing darkness of his study and felt fear settle into his bones. Real fear. The kind he hadn't experienced since he was a kid waiting for his abusive father to come home drunk. Someone wanted him dead. Someone had gotten close enough to put poison in his hands, in his home, in his bed. A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Mr. Cross?" Nia's voice, tentative. "May I come in?" "Yes." She entered carrying a tray, coffee, black, and a sandwich he hadn't asked for. "I thought you might need something to eat. You haven't had anything since this morning." Damien looked at the food and felt his stomach rebel. "I'm not hungry." "I understand, but you should eat anyway. Your body needs fuel, especially after—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "After everything." He wanted to argue, but she was right. He was running on adrenaline and shock, and neither would last forever. "Thank you." Nia set the tray on his desk, then hesitated. "Mr. Cross, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you think she did it?" It was the same question he'd been wrestling with. "Money, I assume. The prenup was ironclad. If we divorced, she'd get almost nothing. But if I died while we were married, she'd inherit the bulk of my estate." "How much?" "Close to $2 billion. Nia's eyes widened. She'd probably never heard a number that large applied to actual money. "That's a lot." "It's not even about the amount." Damien rubbed his face, exhaustion crashing over him. "It's that she looked at me and saw a bank account, not a person, not her husband, just a problem to be eliminated." "I'm sorry." And Nia sounded like she genuinely meant it, which was more than most people in Damien's life could claim. "Don't be sorry. You saved my life." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the tremor she was trying to hide. "How are you holding up?" She laughed, a shaky sound. "Honestly, I'm terrified. I just accused a billionaire's wife of attempted murder. If I'd been wrong. But you weren't. But I could have been. And then I'd be out of a job, possibly facing charges, definitely blacklisted from every household in the city." She wrapped her arms around herself. "My mom's medical bills are $60,000 a month, Mr. Cross. I can't afford to lose this job." $60,000 a month. The number hit Damien like a fist. That was more than most people made in a year, and Nia was carrying that weight while cleaning his toilets and making his tea. "What's wrong with your mother?" "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The treatments are experimental, not covered by insurance." Nia's voice stayed steady, but Damien could hear the pain underneath. "The doctors say she has maybe 6 months, maybe a year if we're lucky. And you're working here to pay for it. Every shift, every hour. I work here during the day, clean offices at night, pick up catering gigs on weekends." She met his eyes. "So when I saw Mrs. Cross put something in your tea, I had about 2 seconds to decide if I was going to speak up or look the other way. And I thought about my mom, about how she raised me to do the right thing even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Damien felt something crack open in his chest. Here was this young woman, barely scraping by, risking everything to save a man she barely knew, while his own wife, who had everything, had chosen murder. "Nia, I'm going to make you a promise. Your mother's medical bills, all of them, past and future, I'll cover them. And you're not losing this job. In fact, I'm tripling your salary and moving you to a position where you never have to scrub another toilet unless you want to." Nia's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Cross, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. You saved my life. That's worth more than money, but money is what I have to give." He stood, walked around the desk. "Thank you, Nia. Truly." She wiped her eyes, nodding, unable to speak. They stood there in the quiet study, two people who'd survived something terrible, and Damien felt the first stirring of something that wasn't fear or shock or betrayal. It was gratitude. And maybe, underneath that, the faint ember of hope that not everyone in the world was a liar and a schemer. The ringing of his phone shattered the moment. Detective Chen's name flashed on the screen. "Mr. Cross, we've located Landon Vale. He was at the marina about to board a private yacht. When officers approached, he attempted to flee." Damien's grip tightened on the phone. "Did you get him?" "We did, And Mr. Cross, when we searched his vehicle, we found some very interesting items. Forged documents. Wire transfer records showing large payments from an offshore account linked to your wife. And a burner phone with text messages that, well, you're going to want to see these. What do they say? Chen's voice hardened. Let's just say they confirm your suspicions about an accomplice. Mr. Vale and your wife have been planning this for at least 6 months. There are messages discussing timing, methods, even what they do with the money after you are dead. The room spun. 6 months. Celeste had been planning to kill him for half a year, smiling at him over breakfast, sleeping beside him at night, all while plotting his murder. I'm coming down to the station, Damien said. I want to see everything. I'll be here. He hung up and looked at Nia. Landon was in on it. The police caught him trying to flee the country. Her face paled. Then it's really true. They were working together. Apparently they've been planning this for months. Damien grabbed his jacket. I need to go to the station. Will you be all right here alone? I'll be fine. But Mr. Cross... She caught his arm. Be careful. If they were desperate enough to try to poison you, there's no telling what else they might have planned. He nodded, touched by her concern. I'll have security posted outside. No one gets in without clearance. Okay. Damien made the arrangements. 2 armed guards from a private security firm, both former police, both instructed to let no one in or out without his explicit approval. Then he climbed into his car and drove toward the police station, his mind churning with questions that all circled back to the same sick realization. The woman he'd married had wanted him dead, and she'd enlisted her lover to help make it happen. The interrogation room at the San Francisco Police Department smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Detective Chen led Damien down a hallway lined with scuffed walls and flickering fluorescent lights, past holding cells where voices echoed against concrete, until they reached a small observation room with a one-way mirror. Before we go in, I want you to see something, Chen said, gesturing to the glass. On the other side sat Landon Vale, looking considerably less polished than the last time Damien had seen him. His expensive shirt was wrinkled, his perfectly styled hair disheveled, and his face had the gray pallor of someone whose world had just collapsed. A different detective sat across from him, a thick folder open on the table between them. Chen pressed a button, and Landon's voice crackled through the speaker. I want my lawyer. I've told you that 5 times already. And your lawyer is on his way, Mr. Vale. But you should know, we've already recovered the text messages between you and Celeste Cross. We have the wire transfers. We have witnesses who saw you at the Cross residence on multiple occasions when Mr. Cross was traveling. The detective leaned forward. We have enough to charge you as an accomplice to attempted murder. The only question now is whether you want to cooperate and possibly reduce your sentence or go down with the ship. Landon's jaw tightened. I didn't try to kill anyone. No, you just helped plan it, discussed timing and methods, accepted money in exchange for your participation. In the eyes of the law, that makes you just as guilty as if you'd poured the poison yourself. Damien watched Landon's face cycle through emotions. Defiance, fear, calculation. The man was weighing his options, trying to find an angle. It was almost impressive how quickly the charming facade had crumbled. He was never supposed to get hurt, Landon said finally, his voice barely audible. The detective pounced. Then what was supposed to happen? I can't. I need to talk to my lawyer first. Chen muted the speaker and turned to Damien. He'll crack. They always do when they realize the other party might flip first. Right now, he's terrified that Celeste is in another room making a deal. Is she? Not yet. She's refused to talk without her attorney, and he's flying in from Los Angeles. Won't be here until tomorrow. Chen opened the folder she'd been carrying. But we don't need her confession. The evidence speaks for itself. She spread photographs across the table. Bank statements showing transfers from an offshore account registered to Celeste. Transfers totaling over $300,000. Paid to Landon over the past 5 months. Text messages between them, dozens of them, discussing everything from Damien's travel schedule to the best methods of untraceable poisoning. Damien's hand shook as he read through them. The messages were clinical, almost businesslike in their brutality. Celeste. He's in New York until Thursday. That gives us 4 days. Landon. Not enough time. We need at least a week to establish the pattern. Celeste. What pattern? Landon. The heart medication. If he's been taking it for a while, the autopsy won't question it. Just looks like a tragic overdose. Celeste. And if they do question it? Landon. They won't. Trust me. Damien's stomach churned. Heart medication? I don't take heart medication. No, but they were planning to start adding it to your food. Small amounts, gradually increasing. According to the messages, the plan was to make you legitimately sick over several weeks, then finish you with what would look like an accidental overdose. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. The cyanide was a backup plan. Faster, but riskier. Why did they switch to the backup? From what we can piece together, you were asking too many questions, coming home at unexpected times, getting suspicious. Chen tapped one of the later messages. This one from 3 days ago. Celeste tells Landon that you're getting too close to the truth, and they need to act fast. Damien read the message, bile rising in his throat. Celeste. He knows something is wrong. I can see it in his eyes. We can't wait anymore. Landon. Then we do it this weekend, Friday night. I'll make sure I have an alibi. Celeste. And if something goes wrong? Landon. Nothing will go wrong. You'll be the grieving widow, I'll be the supportive friend. We wait 6 months for appearances, then we're free. Free. They were going to murder him and call it freedom. There's more, Chen said quietly. She pulled out another set of documents. We found a joint bank account in the Cayman Islands, opened 2 months ago in both their names. The balance is currently 0, but there are projected deposits scheduled to begin the week after next, totaling just over $1.8 billion. Your estimated estate value, minus taxes and immediate expenses. So they'd even planned the financial logistics of his death. Every detail mapped out, every contingency covered. Damien felt something cold settle in his chest, something harder and sharper than fear. How long do you think they were having an affair? Chen hesitated. Based on the messages, at least 8 months? Maybe longer. 8 months. Damien thought back, trying to pinpoint when things had shifted, when Celeste had gone from distant to dangerous. Had there been signs? There must have been. He'd just been too busy, too trusting, too stupidly convinced that his wealth insulated him from this kind of betrayal. I want to see her, Damien said. Mr. Cross, I don't think that's a good idea. I need to see her. I need to hear her explain how she justified this. His voice came out harder than he intended. Please. Chen studied his face, then nodded slowly. I'll arrange it, but you'll be in separate rooms, speaking through video, and I'll be monitoring the entire conversation. Fine. 20 minutes later, Damien sat in a small conference room staring at a monitor. The screen flickered, then Celeste's face appeared. She was in a holding cell, still wearing the clothes she'd been arrested in, but somehow she'd managed to fix her hair and makeup. Even in custody, she was performing. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Damien, don't! The word came out like a blade. Don't say my name like you have any right to it. Celeste's face crumpled. Please, you have to listen to me. This is all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. They found the poison in your purse, Celeste. They found the messages between you and Landon. They found the offshore account where you were planning to stash my money after you murdered me. Damien leaned toward the camera. The only misunderstanding here is that I ever thought I knew who you were. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear, I never wanted it to go this far. Then what did you want? She looked away, struggling for words. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and bitter. I wanted to matter. I wanted to be more than just another pretty face on your arm, another acquisition in your portfolio. But you never saw me, Damien. You were always working, always traveling, always chasing the next deal. I was just there. So you decided to kill me? No. I decided to leave you. That was the original plan. Divorce, take what I could, move on. But the prenup made that impossible. Your lawyers made sure I'd walk away with almost nothing. Her eyes flashed with anger. Do you know what that felt like? Knowing I'd wasted 3 years of my life for what would amount to pocket change? Wasted? Damien's laugh was harsh. You lived in a mansion. You had unlimited spending money. You attended galas with senators and tech billionaires. What exactly did you waste? My youth. My opportunities. Celeste's mask was slipping now, revealing the raw resentment underneath. I could have married someone who actually loved me, who actually wanted to build a life together. Instead, I married you, a workaholic who saw marriage as another business transaction. So you found someone who did love you. Landon. She flinched at the name. Landon understood me. He saw me as a person, not a trophy. Landon saw you as a meal ticket, just like you saw me. Damien's voice was ice. You two deserve each other. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Celeste was crying harder now, her perfect composure finally shattering. We were just going to make you sick, make it look natural. You weren't supposed to suffer. It would have been quick and painless, and you never would have known that's supposed to make me feel better, that you were planning a kinder murder. I didn't have a choice. The prenup left me with nothing. I gave you 3 years, and you were going to throw me away with nothing to show for it. You could have just asked for a divorce. I would have given you something, worked out a settlement. Something isn't enough. Her voice cracked. I wanted what I deserved. I wanted the life I was promised when I married you. And if you weren't going to give it to me, I was going to take it. There it was. The truth, raw and ugly. Celeste hadn't married him for love or partnership or any of the things normal people built marriages on. She'd married him for money, and when that money didn't come fast enough, she'd decided to take it by force. Damien stared at the woman on the screen, this stranger wearing his wife's face, and felt nothing but a vast, hollow relief that she'd failed. I hope it was worth it, he said quietly, because you're going to spend the next 20 years in prison thinking about what you threw away for nothing. Damien, please. He ended the call. Chen was waiting outside the conference room. Are you all right? No, but I will be. Damien straightened his shoulders, forcing himself to focus. What happens now? Now we build the case. The DA will formally charge both of them within 48 hours. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, possibly fraud depending on what else we find in the financial records. With the evidence we have, this should be pretty straightforward. How long until trial? Could be months, could be a year. These things take time. Chen paused. But Mr. Cross, there's something else you should know. We've been going through Landon's phone records, and he made several calls to a number registered to a man named Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb is a known associate of some very unpleasant people, the kind who specialize in making problems disappear, if you know what I mean. Damien's blood ran cold. You think they hired someone? We're not sure yet. The calls could be unrelated, but given everything else, I'd recommend you increase your security. Maybe stay somewhere else for a while, somewhere they wouldn't know to look. I'm not running for my own home. I understand, but please be careful. These people were willing to poison you. If they have other assets in play, I'll be careful. Damien pulled out his phone. I'll call my security team, have them do a full sweep of the house and establish a perimeter. Anything else I should know? Chen shook her head. Just stay vigilant. And Mr. Cross? For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to go through this. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and walked out of the station into the cold San Francisco night. The drive home was a blur. Damien's mind kept replaying the conversation with Celeste, her words echoing in his skull. She'd looked him in the eye and admitted she'd planned to murder him for money, and somehow she'd still managed to make herself the victim. It was almost impressive in its sociopathy. When he pulled into his driveway, the security guards Chen had arranged were already there, 4 of them now, instead of 2, all armed and alert. They checked his ID, confirmed his identity, and waved him through. Inside, the house felt different, haunted. Every room held memories that had been poisoned by revelation. The sitting room where Celeste and Landon had plotted, the kitchen where she'd prepared the fatal tea, the bedroom where she'd smiled and handed him his death in a porcelain cup. He found Nia in the study, reading a book and waiting. She looked up when he entered, her face immediately concerned. How did it go? Damien poured himself a drink, whiskey, neat, because he needed something to burn away the taste of betrayal. They have everything. Messages, bank records, evidence of the affair. It's airtight. That's good, right? It's something. He drank, the liquid fire sliding down his throat. I talked to Celeste. She admitted it. All of it. Nia set down her book. What did she say? That I deserved it. That she was justified because the prenup didn't give her enough money. Damien's laugh was bitter. 3 years of marriage, and apparently I owed her $1 billion severance package. I'm sorry. Don't be. You saved my life. You're the only person in this whole mess who told the truth and did the right thing. He looked at her, this quiet young woman who'd risked everything for a stranger. Why did you do it, Nia? Really? You could have stayed silent, kept your job, avoided all of this. She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. When I was 10, my dad left us. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, but it wasn't enough. We lost our house, ended up in a shelter for a while. She met his eyes. I remember lying on that shelter cot and promising myself that if I ever had the chance to help someone, I would, no matter the cost. That must have been hard. It was, but it taught me something important, that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. She smiled softly. When I saw Mrs. Cross put that powder in your tea, I was terrified. But I thought about my mom, about the kind of person she raised me to be. And I knew I couldn't stay silent. Damien felt something shift in his chest, a warmth spreading through the cold fury. Your mother raised an extraordinary person. She did her best. Nia's eyes glistened. And now, because of you, she's going to get the treatment she needs. You gave me back hope, Mr. Cross. You gave me back my mother's life. They sat in companionable silence, 2 people bound together by circumstance and choice, until Damien's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Detective Chen. Mr. Cross, we have a problem. His stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Marcus Webb, the man Landon was calling. He's missing. Left his apartment 3 hours ago and hasn't been seen since. And Mr. Cross, Webb's specialty is making hits look like accidents, home invasions, gas leaks, car crashes. If Landon hired him to finish the job, Damien was already on his feet. I'm calling in more security, right now. Already done. I've got 2 patrol cars heading to your location, and I've contacted the FBI. If Webb crosses state lines, or if this conspiracy is bigger than we thought, they'll take over the investigation. Chen's voice was tight. Until we locate Webb, I need you to assume you're in active danger. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't open doors without checking. Don't... A crash from downstairs cut her off. Damien's blood turned to ice. Someone's in the house. Get out, now! I'm sending units... Another crash, closer this time. Footsteps pounding up the stairs. Damien grabbed Nia's arm and pulled her toward the door, but it burst open before they could reach it. A man stood in the doorway, mid-30s, nondescript features, wearing dark clothes and gloves. In his hand was a gun with a suppressor attached. Mr. Cross, the man said, his voice eerily calm. I'm going to need you to come with me. Damien stepped in front of Nia, shielding her. Who are you? Someone who was paid very well to make sure you don't testify. The gun never wavered. Now, we can do this easy or we can do this hard. Your choice. The police are already on their way. I know, that's why we need to move quickly. The man's eyes flicked to Nia. The girl comes too. Can't leave witnesses. Damien's mind raced. The security guards outside. Where were they? Had this man taken them out already? And how had he gotten past them into the house? You won't get away with this, Damien said, trying to buy time. This place is surrounded. Maybe, but I'm very good at what I do. The man gestured with the gun. Downstairs. Now. Damien looked at Nia, saw the terror in her eyes, and made a decision. If they went downstairs, they were dead. This man was a professional. He'd kill them and disappear before the police arrived. Their only chance was here, now, while they were still in the study with exits and options. No, Damien said. The man's expression didn't change. Excuse me? I said no. If you're going to kill us, you'll have to do it here, and it won't look like an accident anymore, which means you won't get the rest of your money. A flicker of annoyance crossed the man's face. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Good. Because you're not taking her. Damien's voice was steel. Whatever Landon paid you, I'll triple it. Right now. Wire transfer to any account you want. All you have to do is walk away. The man actually seemed to consider it. His eyes calculated, weighing options. Then he shook his head. Can't do it. I have a reputation to maintain. He raised the gun, aiming at Damien's chest. Nia screamed, and the window behind them exploded in a shower of glass. The gunman spun toward the shattered window, his weapon tracking the movement, and in that split second of distraction, Damien threw himself sideways, crashing into Nia and taking them both to the floor behind the heavy oak desk. Bullets thudded into wood, splintering the antique surface, and Damien wrapped his body around Nia's, making himself a shield. SFPD, drop your weapon! The voice came from outside, amplified and authoritative. Through the jagged hole where the window had been, Damien could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, sweeping across the lawn. The cavalry had arrived faster than he'd dared hope. The gunman cursed, fired 3 more shots in quick succession toward the window, then bolted for the door. His footsteps pounded down the hallway, rapid and retreating. Damien heard shouts from downstairs, more gunfire, then a heavy crash that shook the floor. Nia was trembling beneath him, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "Are you hurt?" Damien asked, running his hands over her arms, checking for blood. No, I'm okay." Her voice was high and thin with shock. "You?" "I'm fine." He helped her sit up, both of them still crouched behind the desk. Glass littered the carpet like scattered diamonds, crunching under his knees. "Stay down until I say it's clear." More footsteps thundered up the stairs, but these were different, measured, coordinated, accompanied by radio chatter. The door burst open and 3 officers swept in, weapons drawn, moving with tactical precision. "Clear!" one of them shouted. "Mr. Cross?" Another officer, a woman with sergeant stripes, lowered her weapon slightly. "Are you and Miss Walker unharmed?" "We're okay." Damien stood slowly, helping Nia to her feet. The shooter went downstairs. "We have him in custody. He tried to go out through the kitchen but ran straight into our backup unit." The sergeant's expression was grim. "Your security guards are down, sir. One's unconscious, the other has a gunshot wound to the shoulder. Paramedics are treating them now." Damien's stomach clenched. "Will they survive?" "Should be fine. The shooter used a suppressed weapon, kept the damage minimal. Probably didn't want to alert the neighborhood before he finished his job." She gestured toward the hallway. "Detective Chen is on her way. In the meantime, we need to secure the scene and get you both somewhere safe." The next hour unfolded in organized chaos. Paramedics arrived and insisted on checking both Damien and Nia for injuries despite their protests. Crime scene technicians swarmed through the study, photographing bullet holes and collecting shell casings. The wounded security guard was loaded into an ambulance, conscious and cursing his own failure to spot the threat. And through it all, Damien sat on the edge of his demolished desk, watching his home transform into a crime scene for the second time in one day. Detective Chen arrived looking like she'd run the entire way from the station. "Mr. Cross, I am so sorry. We had units en route, but this guy was already inside. How the hell did he get past your security?" "Professional," one of the tactical officers said, overhearing. "We found his entry point, came in through the basement window, cut the alarm system, took out the first guard with a taser before he could radio for help. Second guard heard something and went to investigate, got shot for his trouble. This wasn't some street thug. This was military-level execution." Chen's jaw tightened. "And he just happened to show up hours after we arrested Landon Vale. That's not a coincidence." "Landon must have called him before you picked him up," Damien said, his voice flat. "One last contingency plan." "Probably. We'll know more once we interrogate him." Chen looked at the shattered window, the bullet-riddled desk. "But Mr. Cross, this changes everything. This was an active assassination attempt. The DA is going to throw the book at everyone involved. Celeste, Landon, and now this Marcus Webb character." "That's his name? The shooter?" "Marcus Webb, formerly Special Operations, dishonorably discharged 5 years ago, currently freelancing as a contract killer." Chen pulled out her phone, showed Damien a photo. "This him?" Damien studied the image, the same nondescript features, the same cold eyes. "That's him." "Good. He's not talking yet, but he will. They always do once they realize how much prison time they're facing." She pocketed the phone. "In the meantime, you two can't stay here. It's not safe." "Where do you suggest I go? A hotel? My office?" Damien shook his head. "Whoever wants me dead clearly has resources. They'll find me anywhere." "Not anywhere. We have safe houses, protected locations where—" "No." The word came out harder than Damien intended. I'm not hiding. I'm not running. This is my home, and I'm not letting them take it from me. Chen's expression softened. Mr. Cross, I understand you're angry, but anger won't stop a bullet. Neither will running. Damien stood, brushing glass from his clothes. What I need is better security. Real security. Ex-military, preferably special forces. People who can actually stop someone like Webb. I can arrange that, Chen said slowly, but it's going to take time to vet and hire. I'll handle it. I have contacts. Damien was already scrolling through his phone, pulling up numbers. Give me 24 hours and this place will be a fortress. Chen looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Damien's face must have convinced her it would be futile. Fine. But until your people arrive, you're getting a police detail. Armed officers, around-the-clock surveillance, and both of you are sleeping somewhere else tonight. No arguments. Damien glanced at Nia, who'd been sitting quietly through the entire exchange, still pale but composed. Nia, you should go home. Get some rest. Take a few days off. She looked at him like he'd suggested she sprout wings and fly. Mr. Cross, with all due respect, I'm not going anywhere. Nia, they tried to kill you. They almost succeeded. And you think I'm just going to go home and pretend none of this happened? Her voice was steady but fierce. I'm staying. At least until we know you're safe. Damien felt something warm and unexpected in his chest. Loyalty. Real loyalty. Not bought with money or position, but earned through shared danger. All right. But we're going to a hotel, and you're getting your own room with security outside the door. Deal. Chen made the arrangements. Within an hour, Damien and Nia were installed in a luxury suite at the Four Seasons, with 4 police officers stationed in the hallway and strict orders not to open the door for anyone. It was nearly 3 in the morning when they finally had a moment to breathe. Nia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. The city glittered below them, oblivious to the violence that had unfolded just miles away. Damien watched her reflection in the glass, saw the way her shoulders carried tension like armor. You should try to sleep, he said gently. I don't think I can. She turned to face him. Every time I close my eyes, I see that gun pointed at you. I see, her voice cracked. I see what would have happened if the police had been 30 seconds slower. But they weren't. We're alive. We're safe. For now. Nia wrapped her arms around herself. But what about tomorrow? What about next week? What if Landon hired more than one person? What if there are others out there waiting for another chance? They were the same questions circling Damien's mind, the ones he'd been trying not to think about. Then we deal with them, together. She looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Why are you being so kind to me, Mr. Cross? I'm just your maid. You don't owe me anything beyond a paycheck. You saved my life. Twice now, once by warning me about the poison, and again tonight by screaming when Webb raised that gun. You distracted him just long enough for me to react. Damien moved closer, careful not to crowd her. And you're not just my maid, Nia. You're the only person in my entire life who told the truth when it mattered, who risked everything for someone else's sake. That makes you more valuable than all the money I've ever made. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. Just let me take care of you the way you took care of me. He managed a small smile, starting with sleep. You take the bedroom, I'll take the couch. Mr. Cross, Damien, call me Damien. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Damien, thank you. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. Damien stood in the empty suite, listening to the muffled sounds of the city below, and felt the full weight of the day finally crash down on him. His wife had tried to murder him. Her lover had hired a professional killer to finish the job. And the only reason he was still breathing was because a 26-year-old housekeeper from Idaho had the courage to scream, "Don't drink it," when everyone else would have stayed silent. He poured himself a whiskey from the suite's minibar, drank it in one burning swallow, and tried to figure out how to rebuild a life that had been built on lies. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by dreams of poison and bullets and Celeste's cold smile. When Damien woke at dawn, his neck aching from the couch and his mouth tasting like copper, he found Nia already awake in the kitchenette, making coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Not really." She handed him a cup, black, exactly how he liked it. "I kept thinking about everything that happened, and I realized something." "What's that?" "Your wife and Mr. Vale, they didn't just try to kill you for money. They tried to erase you. To take everything you built and pretend you never existed." Nia's eyes were fierce. "That's what makes me so angry. Not just the murder attempt, but the arrogance. Like you were just an obstacle to be removed." Damien sipped his coffee, feeling its heat spread through his chest. "You're right. That's exactly what I was to them. An inconvenience standing between them and the life they wanted." "So what are you going to do about it?" The question hung in the air between them. What was he going to do? He could hide, could hire an army of bodyguards and live in fear. He could flee the country, start over somewhere Celeste and Landon would never find him. Or he could fight. "I'm going to make sure they pay for what they tried to do," Damien said slowly. "Not just legally, though that too. I'm going to make sure the whole world knows what they are. Every investor who ever shook Landon's hand, every society matron who ever envied Celeste's lifestyle, they're all going to know the truth. That's risky. Going public could make you even more of a target. Maybe, but I'm done hiding who I am and what I've survived." Damien set down his cup. "They wanted to erase me. Instead, I'm going to make sure I'm impossible to forget." His phone buzzed. Detective Chen, calling at 6:30 in the morning. He answered immediately. "Mr. Cross, we got a break. Marcus Webb is talking." Damien's pulse quickened. What did he say? Landon Vale hired him 3 weeks ago, paid him $50,000 up front, another 100 promised after the job was complete. Webb was supposed to make it look like a home invasion gone wrong, kill you, make it messy enough to seem random, then disappear. Chen paused. But here's where it gets interesting. Webb says Landon was panicking, kept calling him with updates, changing the timeline. And in one of those calls, Landon let something slip. What? He said, and I quote, "If this doesn't work, she has another plan. Something about insurance." Chen's voice was tight. "Mr. Cross, I think Celeste had a backup plan beyond the backup plan, and we need to figure out what it is before she tries to execute it from behind bars." Damien's blood ran cold. "What kind of backup plan?" "We don't know yet, but I've got forensic accountants going through every financial record we seized, and we're interviewing everyone who had contact with Celeste in the past 6 months. If there's another threat out there, we'll find it. Keep me updated." "Will do. And Mr. Cross, watch your back. Just because we caught Webb doesn't mean you're safe." After he hung up, Damien relayed the conversation to Nia. She listened with growing alarm, her coffee forgotten. "Another plan? What could she possibly have planned that's worse than hiring a hitman?" "I don't know. But knowing Celeste, it's going to be clever and ruthless." Damien ran a hand through his hair. "She's had months to prepare for this. Who knows what contingencies she put in place?" The answer came 3 hours later, delivered by Detective Chen in person at the hotel. She arrived with a laptop and an expression that made Damien's stomach drop. "We found it," Chen said without preamble. "Celeste's insurance policy." She opened the laptop, pulled up a document. It was a life insurance policy in Damien's name, $20 million, taken out 8 months ago, with Celeste as the sole beneficiary. "I already have life insurance," Damien said, confused. "Through my company. Why would she take out another policy?" "Because this one has a suicide clause that expires in exactly 2 weeks. And Mr. Cross, look at the application date." Chen pointed to the screen. This was filed the same week Landon started making payments to Webb. They were creating a narrative. Understanding crashed over Damien like ice water. If I died from the poisoning, or if Webb had succeeded, and if anyone questioned whether it was murder or suicide, this policy would make suicide look financially motivated, especially if Celeste spread rumors that you were depressed, that your business was failing, that you'd been talking about ending it all. Chen's expression was grim. "It's actually brilliant in a horrible way. Even if the murder looked suspicious, she could pivot to claiming you killed yourself and she had the insurance policy to prove you'd been planning it. But I never took out this policy." "No, but the signature looks identical to yours. She must have forged it." Chen zoomed in on the signature line. We'll have handwriting experts verify, but I'd bet money this is fake. Nia leaned over Damien's shoulder, reading the document. So she was planning to kill him and then claim he killed himself to avoid financial ruin? That's insane. It's calculated, Damien corrected, his voice hollow. Every detail planned, every angle covered. If the poisoning looked natural, she'd play the grieving widow and inherit the estate. If it looked suspicious, she'd produce this policy and claim I was suicidal. Either way, she wins. Not anymore, she doesn't. Chen closed the laptop. This policy is evidence of fraud and premeditation. The DA is going to use it to argue that this conspiracy goes deeper and further back than we initially thought. Combined with Webb's testimony and the text messages, we're looking at first-degree murder charges for both Celeste and Landon. How long will they be in prison? If convicted, life without parole. California doesn't mess around with premeditated murder conspiracies, especially when there's this much evidence. Damien should have felt satisfaction, relief, something. Instead, he just felt tired, bone-deep tired, as if the weight of Celeste's betrayal had finally caught up with him. What happens now? He asked. Now you go about your life as normally as possible while we build the case. The arraignment is scheduled for next week. You'll need to testify at some point, but that won't be for a while. Chen stood, gathering her things. In the meantime, get that security team you mentioned. And Mr. Cross, be prepared for this to get ugly. Once the media gets hold of this story, it's going to be everywhere. She was right. By that afternoon, news vans were parked outside Damien's mansion, reporters shouting questions at anyone who walked past. By evening, the story had gone national. Billionaire tech investor nearly murdered by wife and lover in elaborate conspiracy. The headlines were sensational, lurid, turning his private nightmare into public entertainment. Damien's phone rang constantly. Investors wanting reassurance, board members demanding statements, friends he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly concerned about his well-being. He ignored most of it, focusing instead on the practical tasks of survival. He hired the security team, 6 ex-Special Forces operators who swept his house for additional threats, installed new alarm systems, and established a rotating watch schedule. He met with his attorneys to discuss the divorce proceedings and the criminal case. He reviewed his business holdings, making sure nothing would be affected by the scandal. And through it all, Nia stayed. She moved back into the mansion once security declared it safe, returning to her normal duties, but also serving as an unexpected anchor. When reporters tried to ambush Damien outside his office, she was there with a firm no comment and a hand on his elbow, guiding him to safety. When he couldn't sleep, tormented by memories of Celeste's smile and the weight of that teacup in his hand, Nia sat with him in the study, talking about nothing and everything until the sun came up. You don't have to do this, Damien told her one night, after she'd brought him coffee at 2 a.m. for the 3rd time that week. I know, she said simply, but I want to. Why? She was quiet for a moment, considering. Because you're a good person who had something terrible happen to him, and because I know what it's like to feel alone in the dark, wondering if anyone cares whether you live or die. She met his eyes. You're not alone, Damien. Not anymore. Something cracked open in Damien's chest, a warmth flooding through the cold fortress he'd built around his heart. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. Not just physically, but emotionally. He could rebuild. He could trust again. Thank you, Nia, for everything. She smiled, soft and genuine. You're welcome. The arraignment came and went. Celeste and Landon both pled not guilty, their expensive lawyers already spinning narratives about misunderstandings and circumstantial evidence. Marcus Webb, facing his own mountain of charges, agreed to testify against them in exchange for a reduced sentence. The case was building, strong and damning, and the DA was confident of conviction. But Damien knew better than to celebrate too early. Celeste was smart, resourceful, and desperate. Even behind bars, she was dangerous. And until that trial was over and she was locked away for life, he wouldn't feel truly safe. Still, for the first time in weeks, Damien allowed himself to hope. To imagine a future beyond this nightmare. A future where he could trust people again. Where he could build something real instead of buying companionship and calling it connection. A future where maybe, just maybe, the woman who'd saved his life could become something more than his employee. But that was a thought for another day. Right now, survival was enough. 3 months passed before the trial began. 3 months that transformed Damien's life in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The mansion, once a showcase of wealth and status, became something else entirely. A home fortified not just with security systems and armed guards, but with genuine human connection. Nia had accepted his offer of a permanent position, though her role had evolved far beyond housekeeping. She managed his household staff, coordinated with his security team, and somehow made the cavernous rooms feel less empty. More than that, she'd become his friend, the one person he could talk to without filters or pretense. On a Tuesday morning in early March, Damien sat in his study reviewing documents his attorney had sent over when Nia knocked softly on the door. "The DA's office called," she said, stepping inside with a concerned expression. "The trial starts tomorrow. They need you at the courthouse by 8. Damien closed the folder, suddenly unable to focus on the words. Tomorrow. After months of waiting, of watching Celeste's lawyers file motion after motion, trying to suppress evidence and delay proceedings, it was finally happening. "How are you feeling?" Nia asked, reading the tension in his shoulders. "Honestly, terrified." He stood, pacing to the window. "I'm going to have to sit in that courtroom and watch them dissect my entire life. Every mistake, every blind spot, every moment I should have seen what was happening but didn't. You're also going to watch them face justice." Nia's voice was firm. "They tried to kill you, Damien. They planned it for months. The jury needs to hear that from you." She was right, of course. The prosecution's case was strong. The forensic evidence, the text messages, Marcus Webb's testimony. But Damien's account would bring it to life. He would have to take the stand and describe the moment Celeste handed him that poisoned tea with a smile, the moment Marcus Webb pointed a gun at his chest, the sickening realization that the person he'd married had wanted him dead. "Will you come with me?" The question came out before he could stop it. "To the trial, I mean. I know it's asking a lot, and you don't have to, but of course I'll be there." Nia crossed the room, stood beside him at the window. "You shouldn't have to face this alone." That night, Damien barely slept. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. Somewhere across the city, Celeste was probably doing the same thing, preparing for battle. He wondered if she felt any remorse, any guilt for what she'd tried to do. Or was she only angry that she'd been caught? The morning arrived cold and gray, fog rolling in from the bay like a shroud. Damien dressed in a charcoal suit, straightened his tie 3 times before getting it right, and met Nia in the foyer. She wore a simple navy dress, professional and understated, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. The security team loaded them into an armored SUV, and they drove through the city in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The courthouse was a circus. News vans lined the street, cameras tracking their arrival. Reporters shouted questions that Damien ignored, keeping his head down as security ushered them through a side entrance. Detective Chen met them in a secured waiting room, looking sharp in a pressed suit. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." The courtroom was smaller than Damien expected, intimate in a way that made everything feel more real. The gallery was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and a few faces Damien recognized from his social circle. Vultures come to watch the spectacle. He took his seat behind the prosecution table, acutely aware of the eyes on him, the whispers. Then the side door opened and Celeste entered. Damien's breath caught. She wore a cream-colored suit that made her look young and vulnerable, her hair styled simply, makeup minimal. It was a calculated look, designed to make the jury see her as a victim rather than a villain. But when her eyes met Damien's across the courtroom, he saw the truth beneath the performance. Cold calculation, no remorse, just anger that her plan had failed. Landon Vale entered next, looking considerably less composed. His expensive suit couldn't hide the weight he'd lost in jail, the dark circles under his eyes. He kept his gaze straight ahead, refusing to look at either Damien or Celeste. The judge entered, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Winters, and called the court to order. The jury filed in, 12 ordinary people who would decide whether Celeste and Landon spent the rest of their lives in prison. Damien studied their faces, trying to guess what they were thinking, but found only neutral expressions carefully maintained. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by a sharp-eyed ADA named Rachel Morris. She laid out the case with clinical precision, walking the jury through the timeline, the affair, the financial motive, the text messages discussing murder methods, the forged life insurance policy, the poisoned tea, the hired killer. Each fact built on the last, constructing an edifice of guilt so overwhelming it seemed impossible to refute. "The evidence will show," Morris said, her voice ringing through the courtroom, "that Celeste Cross and Landon Vale engaged in a deliberate, premeditated conspiracy to murder Damien Cross for financial gain. They planned it for months. They researched methods. They paid a professional killer. And they came within seconds of succeeding. The only reason Mr. Cross is alive today is because one brave woman refused to stay silent." Damien felt Nia shift beside him in the gallery, uncomfortable with being labeled a hero. Celeste's attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Blackwell, approached his opening statement differently. He painted Celeste as a woman trapped in a loveless marriage, emotionally neglected, driven to desperate measures by Damien's coldness. The cyanide in her purse? A tragic misunderstanding. She'd been researching alternative health remedies and had accidentally purchased something dangerous. The text messages? Taken out of context, twisted by prosecutors eager to make a name for themselves. "My client made mistakes," Blackwell conceded, his voice smooth and sympathetic. "She entered into an inappropriate relationship with Mr. Vale during a time of emotional vulnerability. But that's a far cry from conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution wants you to believe that this elegant, educated woman is a cold-blooded killer. I ask you to see the truth, a wife who felt abandoned, who made poor choices but who never intended anyone to die." It was a strong argument, delivered with practiced sincerity. Damien felt a flicker of doubt. Would the jury buy it? Could 12 strangers look at Celeste's beautiful face and believe she was capable of murder? Landon's attorney went with a different strategy, painting his client as a man manipulated by Celeste, seduced and controlled, ultimately just a pawn in her schemes. "Mr. Vale fell in love with the wrong woman," his lawyer argued, "and that mistake led him down a path he never would have chosen on his own." The first witness was Dr. Morrison, who testified about the cyanide concentration in the tea and explained how quickly it would have killed Damien if consumed. The defense tried to suggest contamination, accidental poisoning, anything but deliberate murder. Morrison shut down each theory with cold facts and scientific certainty. Detective Chen took the stand next, walking the jury through the investigation. She described finding Landon attempting to flee the country, the offshore bank accounts, the forged insurance policy. Under cross-examination, the defense hammered her on procedure, trying to find holes in the evidence chain. Chen never wavered, her testimony precise and unshakable. Marcus Webb testified on day 3, shackled and wearing prison orange. His account was chilling in its matter-of-fact delivery. Landon had contacted him through intermediaries, paid him $50,000 up front, and given him detailed information about Damien's routines, security, and schedule. Webb had entered the house intending to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. He showed no emotion as he described planning to shoot both Damien and Nia, then staged the scene to suggest a random home invasion. "Why did you agree to do it?" Morris asked. Webb shrugged. "Money. That's what I do. Someone pays me. I handle their problem." The casual brutality of the statement sent a visible ripple through the courtroom. Several jurors looked physically ill. On day 4, it was Damien's turn. He took the stand with his heart hammering against his ribs. The courtroom felt smaller suddenly, the faces in the gallery too close, the air too thick. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Morris approached gently, starting with the background. How he'd met Celeste, their whirlwind courtship, the early days of marriage that had seemed adequate if not passionate. Then she guided him through the deterioration, the growing distance, the financial demands. "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" Morris asked. "I'd been suspicious for a while," Damien admitted. Celeste was spending more time with Landon, always behind closed doors. "I overheard part of a conversation where they were discussing moving faster on some plan, asking how much longer they had to wait. But I thought, I hoped. It was about something else. An affair, maybe. Not murder. Tell the jury about the day Niall Walker warned you. Damien took a breath, forcing himself to relive it. I'd been traveling all week. I came home exhausted. Celeste was suddenly warm and attentive, which was unusual. She insisted on making me tea, my favorite, this expensive oolong I only drank when stressed. I was about to drink it when Nia burst into the room screaming at me to stop. What happened next? Nia said she'd seen Celeste put something in the tea. Celeste denied it, became angry, tried to have Nia fired. But I looked in Celeste's purse and found a small bottle of clear liquid. We had it tested. It was cyanide. The courtroom was silent. Morris let the moment breathe, let the jury absorb what Damien had just described, his own wife serving him poison with a smile. Mr. Cross, do you believe Celeste intended to kill you that day? Objection, Blackwell called out, calls for speculation. I'll rephrase. Mr. Cross, based on everything you've learned, the text messages, the financial planning, the hired killer, what do you believe was your wife's intention? Damien looked directly at the jury. She wanted me dead. Not just dead, but erased. She wanted my money, my life, everything I'd built. And when I became an obstacle to that, she decided to remove me. Morris walked him through the rest. The confrontation with Celeste, the discovery of Landon's involvement, the night Marcus Webb broke into his home with a gun. Damien's voice stayed steady even as he described the moment Webb raised that weapon, the moment he thought he was going to die. Then it was Blackwell's turn for cross-examination. Mr. Cross, you've described your marriage as distant, cold. Would you say you were emotionally available to your wife? I worked a lot, but I provided everything she asked for. Everything except attention, love, companionship. Blackwell's voice was gentle, sympathetic. You were building an empire while your wife was building resentment. Isn't that closer to the truth? I won't deny I could have been a better husband. But that doesn't justify murder. No one's saying it does. But perhaps what you interpreted as murderous intent was actually a cry for help from a woman who felt invisible in her own marriage. A cry for help that involved researching untraceable poisons and hiring a professional killer? Damien's voice hardened. That's not a cry for help. That's premeditated murder. Blackwell tried several more angles, suggesting Damien had misinterpreted the evidence, that his hurt feelings were clouding his judgment, that perhaps he wanted to believe the worst of Celeste because it was easier than accepting his own failures as a husband. But Damien held firm, refusing to let the defense twist the narrative. When he finally stepped down, he felt hollowed out, wrung dry. Nia caught his eye from the gallery and gave him a small nod. You did well. You told the truth. The defense called their own witnesses, friends of Celeste who testified about her unhappiness, therapists who treated her for depression, character witnesses who painted her as incapable of violence. They brought in experts to question the forensic evidence, to suggest alternative explanations for the cyanide. But then Morris called Nia Walker to the stand. Nia walked to the witness box with quiet dignity, her small frame somehow commanding attention. She stated her name clearly, placed her hand on the Bible, and sat down. Morris established her background, how she came to work for Damien, her responsibilities, her observations of the household. Then she got to the critical moment. Miss Walker, please tell the jury what you saw on the day in question. Nia's voice was steady, clear. Mrs. Cross sent me upstairs to change linens in the guest bedroom. She said she wanted privacy to prepare something special for Mr. Cross, but I'd left my phone in the kitchen, so I came back down to get it. The kitchen door was slightly open. I looked through and saw Mrs. Cross standing at the counter with a small glass bottle. She opened it, poured white powder into a teacup, and stirred until it dissolved. What did you do? I was confused at first. I thought maybe it was a supplement or something harmless, but something felt wrong. The way she looked around to make sure no one was watching, the way she hid the bottle immediately after, it felt secretive, dangerous. Nia paused, gathering herself. I decided to watch and see what she did with the tea. She carried it upstairs on a tray. I followed at a distance and saw her go into the master bedroom where Mr. Cross was resting. Then I heard her offering him the tea, telling him to drink it while it was hot. What did you do then? I ran into the room and screamed at him not to drink it. Why? Because I knew, Nia said simply. I knew she'd put something harmful in that tea. I didn't know it was cyanide yet, but I knew it was poison. I could feel it. Morris let that statement hang in the air. You risked your job, your safety, your future employment prospects to warn a man you barely knew. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Because someone's life was in danger, and I was the only person who could stop it. Nia looked at the jury, her eyes fierce. My mother raised me to speak up when I saw something wrong, even if it cost me everything, especially if it cost me everything. Blackwell tried to shake her testimony during cross-examination, suggesting she'd misinterpreted what she saw, that she'd embellished details to make herself look heroic. But Nia never wavered. She described exactly what she'd witnessed, no more and no less, and the sincerity in her voice was impossible to fake. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Both sides presented closing arguments that stretched hours, summarizing evidence and making final appeals to the jury's logic and emotion. Then the jury retired to deliberate. The wait was excruciating. Damien and Nia sat in a private room provided by the court, drinking terrible coffee and trying not to think about what would happen if the jury acquitted. Would Celeste and Landon walk free? Would they try again? After 14 hours of deliberation spread over 2 days, the jury sent word they'd reached a verdict. The courtroom reconvened, packed even tighter than before. Damien took his seat. Nia beside him now, instead of in the gallery. Detective Chen sat on his other side. The jury filed in, their faces carefully neutral. Judge Winters called the court to order. Has the jury reached a verdict? The forewoman, a middle-aged teacher, stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree against defendant Celeste Cross, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty. Celeste's composure shattered. She gasped, hands flying to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Her attorney gripped her shoulder, trying to steady her. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree against defendant Celeste Cross, how do you find? Guilty. The verdicts continued. Guilty on all counts for both Celeste and Landon. Conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, wire fraud for the forged insurance policy. Each guilty verdict landed like a hammer blow, sealing their fates. Landon sat frozen, his face gray. Celeste sobbed openly, no longer caring how she looked. Judge Winters scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, then dismissed the jury with thanks for their service. As the court officers led Celeste and Landon away in handcuffs, Celeste looked back one final time. Her eyes found Damien's, and in them he saw not remorse but pure hatred. This isn't over, she mouthed silently. But it was. The trial had ended. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, Morris held a brief press conference. Today's verdicts send a clear message that no one is above the law, regardless of wealth or social status. Damien Cross is alive today because one brave woman chose to speak up. This case reminds us all that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing despite our fear. Damien and Nia slipped out through a side exit, avoiding the media circus. The security team got them safely to the SUV, and they drove back to the mansion in silence. Only when they were safely inside, the doors locked and the alarm set, did Damien finally allow himself to breathe. It's really over, he said, the words feeling surreal. Almost, Nia replied. Still need to get through sentencing. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Winters was not lenient. Celeste received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Landon received the same. Marcus Webb, who'd testified against them, got 25 years. The judge's statement was scathing, condemning not just their actions but their complete lack of remorse. You looked at a human life as an obstacle to wealth, Winters said, staring down at Celeste and Landon. You planned his murder with the same cold calculation most people use to plan a vacation. The evidence shows not a shred of conscience, not a moment of hesitation. Society must be protected from people like you. I can only hope that decades in prison will give you time to find the humanity you so clearly lacked. The divorce was finalized within a month. Celeste's claims to Damien's assets were nullified due to her criminal conviction. She would die in prison with nothing but the clothes on her back. In the aftermath, Damien found himself rebuilding not just his life, but his understanding of what life should be. He'd spent so many years chasing deals, accumulating wealth, measuring success in dollars and acquisitions. It had taken nearly dying to realize that none of it mattered if you were surrounded by people who saw you as a transaction rather than a person. He restructured his business holdings, delegating more responsibility so he could actually have a life outside of work. He established a foundation dedicated to helping families afford cancer treatment. Nia's mother, who'd received 6 months of experimental treatment thanks to Damien's funding, was in remission and served on the foundation's board. He started accepting dinner invitations from actual friends rather than business contacts, started taking weekends off, started remembering what it felt like to be human. And through it all, Nia was there. Not as his employee anymore. She'd transitioned to running the foundation, a role that utilized her intelligence and compassion, but as his closest friend. The person who knew him better than anyone, who'd seen him at his absolute lowest and hadn't flinched. 6 months after the trial ended, Damien asked her to dinner. Not as a business meeting, not as employer and employee, as two people who cared about each other, who'd survived something terrible together and come out the other side changed. They went to a small Italian restaurant in North Beach, far from the society haunts where Damien used to perform for investors. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, her mother's progress, his latest foundation project, a book they'd both read, a documentary she wanted him to see. Over dessert, Damien reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to hear me, really hear me, before you respond." Nia's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "Okay. You saved my life. Twice. And in the process, you showed me what real courage looks like, what real loyalty looks like, what it means to do the right thing even when it costs you everything." He squeezed her hand gently. "I spent 3 years married to someone who saw me as a bank account. I don't want to make that mistake again. I don't want to confuse gratitude for something more or obligation for affection. But Nia, what I feel for you isn't gratitude or obligation. It's Damien," she interrupted softly. "I know." "You know?" "I've known for months, probably since that night we sat in your study at 3 in the morning talking about nothing because neither of us could sleep. Maybe even before that." She smiled, a little sad, a little hopeful. "But I didn't want to say anything because I wasn't sure if what you felt was real or just trauma bonding. If you were grateful to me or actually cared about me as a person." "I care about you, more than I've cared about anyone in longer than I can remember." Damien's voice was raw, honest. "I'm not asking you to marry me or move in or make any grand gestures. I'm just asking, can we see where this goes? Take it slow, build something real instead of something transactional?" Nia's smile widened, genuine and bright. "I'd like that." They left the restaurant hand in hand, walking through the San Francisco evening as fog rolled in from the bay. Somewhere across the city, in a maximum security prison, Celeste Cross sat in a cell and contemplated the ruins of her schemes. Landon Vale did the same in a different facility. Marcus Webb counted down the years until he might see freedom again. But Damien didn't think about them. He thought about the woman beside him, small and strong and impossibly brave. He thought about second chances and new beginnings. He thought about how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered, not the money or the houses or the businesses, but time. The precious, irreplaceable gift of time to build something real with someone who saw him as more than the sum of his bank accounts. The security team followed at a discreet distance, still necessary because the world was dangerous and there were always threats. But for the first time in his life, Damien didn't feel like he was walking alone through that danger. He had Nia, and that, he was beginning to understand, was worth more than all the billions he'd accumulated in his pursuit of success. The real luxury he'd almost lost wasn't money. It was the chance to be known, truly known, by someone who chose to stay not because of what he could give them, but because of who he was. And the courage of one person who'd refused to stay silent when silence would have been safer, easier, more profitable. In the end, it wasn't his wealth or power or success that had saved him. It was one woman's willingness to scream, "Don't drink it," when everyone else would have looked away. And that made all the difference.